The afternoon it all tilted began, like most, with the cooing of pigeons and the rattle of sun-bleached laundry lines. I was sketching trim plans for a client's attic conversion pencils, and coffee balanced on the parapet when a sudden scuffle of sneakers on brick jerked my attention. Upward, there, straddling the ridge of our joined rooftops, was my neighbor's kid brother, Mason, 22, weary and flushed, arms outstretched toward a panicked white pigeon flapping against a television, antenna like a crumpled handkerchief. Mason always said hello in the stairwell flash-bright grin, earbuds dangling, but we'd never shared more than borrowed screwdrivers and awkward small talk about city water pressure. Still, something about the way his shoulders squared against the sky pulled me to my feet before my mind caught up. One misplaced step and he'd tumble 3 stories into the gnarled plum tree that divided our yards. "Stay there, I've got you," I called, surprised at the steadiness of my voice. I crossed the slate tiles in a half-crouch, balancing on memories of childhood summers spent repairing my grandfather's barn roof. The heat baked through the soles of my boots, sweat blurred the edges of my glasses. Up close, Mason's freckles looked like ink droplets scattered by a careless fountain pen. He glanced over, breath hitching. "Sorry, John," Sonny escaped again. "If my brother finds out I lost her, we'll get her," I said, planting myself beside him. My pulse thudded in places I pretended not to notice. I guided his free hand toward the bird, coaxing quiet patience instead of frantic grabs. The pigeon calmed, feathers settling with a shiver. When Mason finally cradled her to his chest, relief softened his expression into something dangerously tender. "You're a lifesaver," he exhaled, voice low from exertion. Close enough. I caught the mild citrus of his laundry soap and a faint campfire note from whatever cologne college boys wear when they're trying not to look like they've tried it all. We retreated to the safer flat of my side of the roof. Mason kept the pigeon tucked against his t-shirt like a fragile secret. Bands of sunlight striped across his forearms, highlighting faint scar lines, the sort you earn from bike chains and tree branches, not bar fights. Every detail felt newly magnified. The small tremor in his wrist, the way his throat bobbed when he breathed, a strand of hair curling damp against his temple. "Thanks," he repeated, quieter this time, as though the view demanded reverence. Below us, clay courtyards flickered with children's kites. Laundry waved like lazy flags. Somewhere, an ice cream cart's bell chimed a song I hadn't heard since middle school. It struck me then how little I'd shared of my own rooftop world. Mason looked at the city the way I used to, as if every alley still held a promise. "I'm up here most evenings," I offered, surprising us both. "If you ever need pigeon patrol or just a taller ladder knock." His eyes lingered on mine a beat too long to feel innocent. "Tomorrow, I'm building a proper coop, so she can't escape again. I could use another set of hands." Another set of hands. The phrase warmed me in places the sun couldn't reach. I nodded, forcing my smile to stay casual. Inside, something unfolded, slow but certain, like a paper crane discovering its wings. Back at my drafting table, I tried to refocus on roof pitches and insulation specs, but Mason's grin kept intruding, coloring the margins with thoughts I'd spent years folding away. I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly goodwill. But the graphite lines on my plans trembled with an energy I hadn't felt since my last serious crush. Long before I convinced myself I was safer alone. Tomorrow, then, one evening on the roof, hammering slats into place, sharing cold soda straight from the bottle. Maybe nothing would change, maybe everything would. Either way, I'd already penciled Mason into my calendar and into a corner of my guarded heart before the pigeon's feathers had finished settling. It started with pigeon coop blueprints spread across my kitchen island, a place usually reserved for half-assembled IKEA furniture and the occasional midnight grilled cheese experiment. Mason arrived exactly at 6, sleeves rolled, stray curls, damp with sweat from hauling a carton of cedar planks up 3 flights. He greeted me with a mock salute and a breathless "Architect John, reporting for duty," as if we'd been partners on dozens of projects. I laughed, matching his theatrical bow. "Project Manager Mason, you're late. The pigeons have filed a union grievance." "Time and a half oats," he quipped, slotting the wood against the wall. Banter slipped between us like a language we'd accidentally invented and were only just remembering. We sketched perch angles, measured ventilation gaps, and argued about whether pigeons needed a skylight. They didn't, but Mason insisted. Everyone likes a little starlight now and then. Whenever our pencils touched the same spot, my fingers tingled as though static lived beneath my skin. I pretended to refocus on dimensions. He pretended not to notice my stuttered breath, shared history, revealed in scraps our conversation wove through the years we'd spent as neighbors yet near strangers. I learned he majored in environmental science, that his senior thesis involved mapping pigeon migration routes over the city's thermal currents. He learned I kept old sketchbooks under my bed, entire summers captured in charcoal swirls, and that I hated cilantro but loved the color green it stained my fingers when crushed. We traded little memories like marbles, the time his brother blasted indie rock at 2 a.m. and I slid a polite note under their door, the week my hot water heater failed and I borrowed their shower, leaving behind precisely folded towels Mason said he'd recognized as the chef's kiss of laundry etiquette. Each recollection rewound the invisible tape spool between us, proving we'd noticed each other long before a runaway pigeon made it obvious. Chemistry in motion by dusk. My kitchen smelled of fresh wood and lemon cleaner. Mason balanced a plank across two bar stools, steadying it while I drilled pilot holes. Every vibration traveled up the board and into our palms, a Morse code of presence. Somewhere between the third and fourth screw, he nudged my elbow. Hold on, you've got sawdust, he murmured, brushing a fingertip across my cheekbone. The touch lasted a heartbeat longer than necessary, enough for warmth to settle where his skin met mine. I swallowed, forcing casualness, free exfoliation, benefits of dye. Mason grinned, but his gaze lingered, hazel eyes flicking to my lips as if considering a boundary neither of us had verbalized. The silence tightened, ripe with something I couldn't name without risking it. A small complication when we carried the half-built frame to the roof. An unexpected hitch arrived. The hatch door jammed, old metal expanded in the heat. The latch refused every shove. We'll have to go through your attic window, I suggested. Mason was game to game, perhaps because 5 minutes later he was halfway through the narrow dormer. One sneaker braced on my shoulder for leverage. Try not to kick me off, I said, steadying his calf. His muscles flexed under light fabric, and I felt, absurdly, as if I were gripping the branch of a young tree. Mason grunted, wriggling forward until only our joined hands connected him to the room. He looked down, upside down, face flushed, breath quick, trustful. I've got you. The words were simple, but my chest ached with how much I meant them. He squeezed once before releasing, landing in a soft thump among dusty holiday boxes inside the attic. All clear, he called, voice echoing. I crawled through after him, shirt snagging on a nail. He reached to free me. Our torsos aligned in a cramped V of lamplight and stored memories. For a second, neither moved. Dust motes drifted between us like tiny planets searching new orbits. Thanks, I whispered. Anytime. He breathed back, inside jokes. Blooming, we sped the next hour retrieving forgotten tools from my storage trunk, items I hadn't touched since college woodshop, a hand plane nicknamed the Planemeister, and a hammer labeled MC Slammer in Sharpie. Mason posed with them like fashion accessories, coaxing me into ridiculous selfies, one with matching grim carpenter's frowns, another pretending the hammer was a microphone. Laughter ricocheted off rafters, wrapping us in its easy echo. When my phone timer beeped reminding me to stretch architect life hazards, Mason stole it, setting a new alert. Hydration break, every 30 minutes, he declared, non-negotiable. I don't want my co-chief collapsing. Bossy, I teased. Efficient, he countered, offering a water bottle. Our fingers brushed, a charge shivered through me. The bottle remained suspended between us, as if neither wanted to sever the touch. Hints beneath the surface back on the roof, twilight painted brick chimneys mauve and gold. We aligned the frame on new brackets, shoulders nudging, breaths synchronized from shared effort. At one point Mason lost his balance. I steadied him with a hand at his waist. The fabric of his t-shirt clung lightly to damp skin. Warmth radiated through my palm, grounding us both. He stayed like that a second longer than equilibrium required. Sunlight fading round us, like a slow closing curtain. We make a good team, he said softly once he straightened. He didn't step away, neither did I. Yeah, I managed. He flashed that grin, half mischief, half wonder. Tomorrow, paint and purchase, tomorrow, I echoed. Grateful dusk hid my blush. Quiet goodbyes with loud implications when we parted at the stairwell, hands full of tools and leftover planks. He paused on the landing. Hey, John? His voice carried an unfamiliar hitch. Yeah, there's a meteor shower the day after next. You can see it from the roof at like 4 in the morning. Want to set an alarm? I finished, hard hammering, wouldn't miss it. His smile widened, relieved and a little shy. Cool. Night then. Night, Mason. He disappeared down the steps, footfalls soft. I lingered, touching the railing where his hand had slid moments before, feeling the phantom warmth. Somewhere below, a pigeon cooed, a quiet, contented sound as if echoing promises not yet spoken. Walking back to my apartment, I realized the complication of a stuck hatch had opened something far more difficult to unjam. The door I'd braced against, wanting someone who might actually want me back. And for the first time in a long while, that possibility felt less like risk and more like sky. The meteor shower arrived 2 nights later like a promise in ink. But our carefully drawn plan unraveled before the first streak of light crossed the sky. At 3:45 a.m., Mason rapped quietly on my door, hoodie half-zipped, hair tousled in a way that betrayed the haste of a midnight alarm. I grabbed the thermos of cocoa I'd prepared, too nervous to risk coffee at this hour, and led him to the attic window. We slipped through with practiced ease, hauling a folded camp blanket and Mason's battered star chart. The air held the kind of hush you only notice when a city is still deciding whether to wake or sleep. Outside, the roof felt cool under our sneakers. We spread the blanket beside the nearly finished pigeon coop, now painted a deep twilight blue. Mason adjusted a little battery lantern, its amber glow barely bright enough to outline his cheekbones. I set 2 mugs beside us, steam curling up as a fragile offering. He exhaled, breath visible. Made it in time. Plenty, I said, pretending. My pulse wasn't pounding. We lay shoulder to shoulder, backs against the blanket, eyes tilted to the sky. At first, conversation flowed like always, teasing about whose constellation knowledge was rustier, whether cocoa should be sweet or obscenely sweet, as Mason argued. But the silence between our words grew gummy, stretched thin by things unsaid. I caught myself counting every brush of fabric, his sleeve grazing my forearm, the subtle warmth radiating through layers that suddenly felt insufficient. I wanted to inch closer, but the possibility he might flinch kept me still, hands fidgeting with the mug. Instead, a faint streak flashed across the firmament, our first meteor. Mason inhaled, and his shoulder nudged mine in unconscious excitement. Did you see that? I nodded, whispering, make a wish. Too late, he murmured, gaze still skyward. Already did. The words slid over my skin like cool water. I didn't dare ask what he'd wished for. My chest tightened. A familiar warning to tamp down hope before it bloomed into something troublesome. The roof betrays you set for 06, after a particularly bright arc burned white over Orion. Mason stood to stretch, the lantern tipped, rolling toward the hatch. He lunged to stop it, but his foot slipped on dew-slick slate. Instinct overrode thought. I shot up, grabbing for his wrist. Momentum yanked me off balance too, and we collided in a tangle of limbs that ended with my back against the coop door and Mason plastered to my chest. Both of us breathless. You okay? I managed, voice embarrassingly hoarse. Fine. He laughed, but the sound was shaky. His palms pressed into my shoulders, steadying himself, even through hoodies. The heat between us spiked. A tremor, maybe cold, maybe adrenaline, rippled through him, and I felt it echo down my spine. He eased off, clearing his throat. Guess we should secure that lantern. I bent to retrieve it, hard hammering. When I straightened, Mason tested the hatch handle, intending to prop it open for ventilation. The handle refused. He jiggled it harder. John, I tried. Nothing. The mechanism had slammed shut when we'd climbed out, warped by the cool air. A chill knot from the wind raced through me. The only alternative route back was the dormer window into my attic, but that one opened inward only. Impossible to reach from outside without tools. How stuck are we? He asked. Very, I confessed. He whistled low. Caretaker doesn't unlock the rooftop access until 6. That's nearly 2 hours. He rubbed his neck, exhaling white. Looks like we're camping out. Good thing you're the prepper with a blanket. I forced a grin, though my nerves buzzed. 2 hours of enforced closeness on a chilly roof, exactly the kind of scenario my imagination had rehearsed 100 reckless times, minus the safety of an exit. Body language speaks louder. We settled on the blanket, this time draping a corner over our legs for warmth. Mason leaned into me, whether for heat or comfort I couldn't tell. Our hips touched, a line of fire through denim. He sipped cocoa, then offered me his mug when mine emptied. I took it, lips brushing the spot where his mouth had been moments earlier. The taste of cinnamon lingered like a secret. You're shivering, he observed. Here. He tugged my hood over my head, fingertips sliding across the edge of my ear. A spark darted down to the pit of my stomach. I managed a joke. Full service stargazing? Only for VIP clients, he returned, but his eyes softened. In the lantern light, they looked almost amber, pupils wide. He dropped his gaze to the blanket, fussing with a frayed thread. I keep thinking about that day on the roof. Feels like everything's been different since. My breath caught. This was the hallway to Confession City, and part of me itched to bolt. Different good or different complicated both. He chuckled under his breath. I mean, God, I don't want to make this weird. A meteor stabbed across the sky, silver blue. So bright it carved our shadows on the coop wall. Mason's face tilted up, awash in starlight. He looked half astonished, half determined, like someone about to leap a fence he'd stared at too. Long inner turmoil in staring me mind spun. Say something, admitted. But the image of him recoiling, apologizing, pulling away forever, my bones locked around that fear. Instead, I murmured, nothing's weird, you're safe with me, remember? He smiled sadly. I know, you always make me feel steady. His elbow brushed mine. Sometimes I wonder if I make you feel anything. The question sliced clean through my practiced composure. I opened my mouth, nothing came. The air between us vibrated with the answer I dared not voice. I looked away, jaw clenched, sure he could hear my pulse pounding. He misread the silence, exhaling a fragile laugh. Ignore me, I'm sleep drunk. Accidental escala tonto shoved down embarrassment. Mason busied himself demonstrating how pigeons navigate by magnetic fields. He lifted my hand, tracing gentle circles on my palm. To mimic invisible currents, the touch was casual, almost scientific, but each swirl felt like fire. I swallowed against a dry throat. When he realized what he was doing, his fingers hesitated but didn't quite let go. Night humidity beaded on his hairline. His tongue darted out to wet his lips. My gaze followed. Traitorous. For a second, our breathing synchronized again, the world narrowing to shared warmth and half-lit eyes. Breaking point to footsteps echoed in the stairwell below. The caretaker starting his rounds. The spell snapped. Mason jerked upright, scooting an inch away, an inch that felt like a mile. I scrambled to my feet just as keys jingled and the hatch creaked open. Morning, gents. The caretaker grunted, oblivious to the electricity crackling around us. We mumbled thanks and hurried inside, stumbling down the stairs with 2 loud footsteps and even louder silence. At my apartment door we paused, blanket folded between us. His fingers brushed mine as we passed it back and forth, neither willing to release first. Finally he cleared his throat. Same time tomorrow to finish the coup. Of course, I said, though my heart still thrummed from the near confession. He nodded, soft smile in place, but his eyes, those earnest, searching eyes, looked like they still held questions hanging unsaid in the sky above the roof. Get some sleep, John, he whispered. You too, Mason. He walked away, hoodie pockets jammed tight, head tilted as if replaying every moment we'd nearly stepped over that invisible line. I closed my door, leaned against it, and let out a breath I wasn't aware I'd held since the lantern rolled. The meteors had streaked in silence, burning bright and vanishing before anyone below noticed. I wondered whether things between Mason and me would flare the same way, brilliant, dangerous, then gone. Part of me feared it. A larger part ached for that fire to land, to stay, to burn away the careful defenses I'd spent years forging. Tomorrow, I promised myself, tomorrow I'll say something. Yet I couldn't ignore the tremor in my hand where his fingers had traced invisible currents, proof that even unsaid words can leave permanent marks. The next evening, the city throbbed with the hum of weekend traffic, but up on the roof it was calm, just the distant buzz of neon signs and the muted trill of crickets. Staking claims in rooftop gardens. Mason arrived with 2 small hinges clinking in his pocket and a takeout bag fragrant with sesame noodles. We worked side by side in the fading light, screwing the hinges onto the coop's clean-edged door, trading the drill back and forth like a secret handshake. My mind barely registered the task. Every brush of his sleeve against mine sent sparks ricocheting across my ribs. I'd rehearsed 50 ways to tell him how I felt, each one dissolving the moment I caught his smile. But the air between us had changed since the meteor shower. It held a restless hum, like a guitar string stretched too tight. When the final screw bit home, Mason stepped back, wiped sawdust from his palms, and breathed out. We did it, he grinned, wide and unguarded, then surprised me by turning the grin into a solemn salute. To our fearless pigeoneers, I chuckled, trying to hide my nerves. Want to christen it? First residents move in tomorrow. Already named the coop, he said, tapping the roofline. I wrote it under the eave, the perch and promise. The name lodged in my chest. Promise. I pretended to study the sky instead of his face. Nice ring to it, thought so. A pause, longer than comfortable. John, can we grab some water? I'm overheating. Sure, my place, he nodded. eyes shifting away as if suddenly shy. We descended through the dormer window, single file, Mason's hand grazing my back for balance. The touch lingered like a brand. Inside the apartment, me studio smelled of cedar shavings and fresh ginger, the result of quick steep tea I'd brewed while he washed his hands in the bathroom. Mason emerged, towel slung around his neck, curls damp from running water through them. He accepted the mug, wrapping both palms around the ceramic like it was winter, not early summer. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." He smiled, but it wobbled. "Just feels big, finishing something." We sat at the drafting table, noodles between us, chopsticks clicking in the quiet. Conversation stalled unusual for us. Mason's knee bounced beneath the table, jostling the pencil tin. I waited, letting the silence invite whatever needed saying. After a minute, he pushed his food away, eyes fixed on the sketchbook half-tucked. "Under blueprints, can I look?" Blood rushed to my ears. That sketchbook held everything: rooftops, sunsets, and lately, him. Before I could deflect, he'd slid it free, flipping pages. Charcoal cityscapes passed, then pigeons in flight, then a profile of him crouched by the coupe door, angle of his jaw rendered in soft graphite. His breath caught. "John," I opened my mouth, but the words jammed. He turned another page, Mason laughing, head tipped back, eyes squinting against light. Then one more, him leaning on the parapet, hands cupped around a pigeon, gaze trained on the horizon. An intimacy thrummed from the page louder than any confession could. Heat rushed up my neck. I forced myself to speak. "I was practicing figures. You were there." Mason traced the edge of the drawing with a fingertip. Expression complicated wonder and fear braided together. "These are beautiful, thanks," I whispered, heart hammering. He shut the sketchbook gently, like it was breakable, and swallowed. "You see me in ways I forget to see myself." A shaky laugh makes it hard to keep things casual. The room contracted, oxygen thinning. "Do you want them to stay casual?" He lifted his eyes. "That's the thing, I don't know if I can pretend anymore." His voice dropped. "I keep replaying that night on the roof." I almost said something and chickened out. My pulse thundered. "Me too." A beat. Mason stood, restless, pacing between the drafting table and the kitchenette. "I've been straight my whole life, at least I thought." He raked a hand through damp curls. "But when I'm around you, everything tilts. I look forward to stupid things, lugging wood upstairs, arguing about pigeon skylights just because it's with you." He stopped in front of the window, city lights flickering across his profile. "And it scares me, not because I don't want it, because I do. But I don't want to mess up the best friendship I've stumbled into." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in me. I rose, stepping closer, careful as approaching a wild bird. "You're not going to mess anything up by telling the truth." Mason turned, eyes shining, throat working. "Then tell me yours." My hands shook, but I didn't hide them. "I think about you all the time, more than is comfortable. I watch the way you cradle your pigeons, how you treat every project like it matters. I catch myself sketching you, instead of billable designs." I met his gaze fully. "I'm terrified, too, of wanting something that might not last, but pretending I'm fine being just your handyman neighbor. It's getting harder each day." Silence. The refrigerator's hum sounded like jet engine roar in the stillness. Mason's chin trembled. He stepped forward, hesitated, then lifted my hand, palm up. He placed it over his racing heart. The thud echoed through skin and bone. "That's what you do to me," he whispered. My own heartbeat answered beneath his fingers. "Feels familiar." He exhaled a trembling laugh. Relief and disbelief mingled. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said softly. "But we could start with not pretending." His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt, maybe permission. Whatever he found drew him closer until we shared one breath. Our foreheads brushed, tentative. I caught the citrus campfire scent again, now tinged with warm ginger from the tea. "Is this okay?" he murmured. "It's perfect." My voice cracked on the word. We hovered there, suspended, fear and desire balanced on a wire. Then Mason's thumb grazed the corner of my mouth as if wiping away invisibility itself. I tilted forward the smallest distance. Our lips met, feather light, a test more than a claim. The world funneled into that single point of contact, soft, careful, impossibly real. He pulled back an inch, eyes wide. "Hi," he breathed. I laughed, shaky with wonder. Hide. His smile bloomed, triumphant and vulnerable at once. Then he kissed me again, deeper, a lingering acknowledgement of everything unsaid, finally spoken. I felt his hand slide to my waist, hesitant pressure asking if I'd stay. I answered by threading fingers through his curls, anchoring us both. When we parted, the room looked different, as if sharper around the edges, colors brighter. Mason pressed his forehead to mine. That was better than all the wish on a meteor nonsense I rehearsed. I brushed my thumb along his cheek. Don't knock meteors, they gave us 2 hours to get this scared. He laughed, a sound full of relief. True. We drifted to the couch, collapsing into cushions like swimmers reaching shore. Mason tucked his knees under him, one arm draped across the backrest so his fingers toyed with my collar. I rested ankle over ankle, trying to slow my pulse. Can I ask something stupid? He said. Double quotes always. Was I the only one freaking out about that locked hatch? I shook my head. I thought my heartbeat might pop nails out of the coop. He grinned, bashful. I almost told you then, but I worried you'd think I was confusing adrenaline with this. Adrenaline doesn't make you draw someone when you should be drafting roof trusses, I said. His ears reddened. You drew me more than once, half my sketchbook, if I'm honest. He looked simultaneously startled and pleased. I want to see them later. All of them. Even the bad ones. I don't keep the bad ones, I admitted. Mason studied me, seriousness replacing teasing. Promise me something, name it. No more pretending on my side or yours. If we're scared, we talk. If we're confused, we talk. He shrugged, sheepish. I don't have a manual for this. I covered his hand with mine. Deal. He laced our fingers, gaze turning thoughtful. Sooner or later my brother will notice I'm spending every night up here. People might talk. A flicker of old anxiety surged, but I steadied myself. We'll figure it out together. I'm not going anywhere. A soft smile. Me neither. He leaned in, kissing the corner of my mouth, simple, sweet, sealing the promise. Outside the open window, city noise swelled, but inside our small studio the world narrowed to shared breaths. And the new, exhilarating fact of us. Later, Mason dozed with his head on my shoulder, fingers still twined in mine. I stared at the ceiling. Hard calm at last. The coop sat finished above us, christened with a name that suddenly felt prophetic. The perch and promise. We'd built it with careful hands and half-spoken hopes. Now it waited to house new life somewhere beneath my ribs. Another kind of wing beat stirred, vulnerable but determined. I realized I wasn't afraid of the leap anymore. Whatever came next, we'd face it side by side, on rooftops or in stairwells, sketchbooks or star charts in hand. And for the first time in years, the open sky beyond my window felt less like distance and more like invitation. Sunrise bled slowly across the studio walls, turning Mason's curls gold where they rested against my chest. All night we had drifted between half-sleep and soft, startled laughter, testing the newness of us the way you test a bridge after the last nail goes in. Now birds outside the window announced the day like overexcited heralds, and my cramped shoulder begged me to shift, yet I stayed still, not ready to end the perfect weight of his head. Mason stirred, nose nuzzling the seam of my t-shirt. Morning, he mumbled, voice husky with sleep. Morning, I echoed, savoring how the word felt different now, thicker, somehow sweeter. He blinked up at me, confusion melting into a smile as memory returned. So that wasn't a fever dream. Pretty vivid for a dream, I said, tapping the faint stubble on his jaw. My imaginary scenarios usually have better hair. He huffed out a laugh, shoving lightly at my shoulder. Rude. My hair is magnificent. Can't argue there. I brushed a rogue curl back, letting fingers linger. His eyelids fluttered, a tiny tell that the touch still thrilled him. Little shifts, big meanings migrated to the kitchenette, in companionable silence, as though we'd rehearsed the choreography for years. I set the kettle to boil. He found mugs without asking. Our shoulders touched when we crossed paths. Neither of us apologized or pulled away. Sweetener? He asked, opening the sugar tin. Just a splash of honey. He scooped it, tasting the end of the spoon with an exaggerated wink. I rolled my eyes, but heat curled low in my stomach anyway. The ordinary felt suddenly electric. The clink of ceramic, the hiss of water, the steam fogging his glasses until he pushed them up to his curls. At the table, he toyed with the mug handle. So next steps, the words sounded casual, but his foot tapped an anxious rhythm against mine. I took a breath. We finished the coop, obviously. A smile tugged at his mouth. Then maybe take Sonny on supervised flight lessons. And after birds, he pressed, eyes searching. I reached across, threading our fingers. After birds, we navigate life the same way we built that coop. Measure twice. Talk through every hinge. Laugh when the drill battery dies. He squeezed, even when my brother asks why I practically live on the roof. Especially then. I hesitated, voicing the worry that had nipped at me all night. I won't ask you to label anything before you're ready. If you need time, John. He drew a slow breath, gathering courage. I'm terrified of messing up, but hiding feels worse now. I don't want a secret. I want space to figure it out with you. The clarity in his voice hit me like sun through stained glass. I nodded. Then we'll give ourselves that space. One honest conversation at a time. Relief softened his shoulders. He tugged my hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles light, reverent. My pulse answered like a drum line. Playful teasing in new territory, by the way, he murmured. I might have told Sunny you design her a penthouse loft. Oh, she wanted an open concept layout, obviously. Minimalist grain troughs. Mood lighting, I'll draw up plans. But you're on sanding duty. He groaned theatrically. Slave driver. Then, quieter. I like this us ribbing each other and knowing it means more. So do I leaned in, brushing noses. He met me halfway for an unhurried kiss, warm, mint-flavored. Confident now that the first barrier had fallen. When we parted, he stayed close, foreheads touching. We should probably eat real breakfast, I murmured, though I could have kissed him until noon. Deal. He kissed me once more, quick, like punctuation, and hopped off the stool. But I'm making the eggs. Last time you almost set the pan on fire. Designers work better with charcoal. I called after him. He threw a dish towel at my head. I caught it, laughing. Future threads woven over toast while he whisked eggs and I sliced bread. Conversation drifted to bigger things. Mason's final semester, my freelancing schedule, vacation days we could align. Each idea felt like placing another beam in a structure. Neither of us had dared to blueprint yesterday. We acknowledged hurdles, his brother's protective streak, my habit of burying stress in work, the slanted looks a new couple might get, yet none of it felt insurmountable. I keep imagining us traveling, Mason mused, plating fluffy eggs, backroad drives, stopping at random bird sanctuaries. As long as there's decent coffee, I said, offering a toast slice. He bumped his hip into mine, and sketching stops. I want you to draw every place we land, only if you promise to color comment on my shading. Deal. He lifted his fork but paused, expression softening. Thank you for being brave first. I brushed my thumb over the back of his hand. You made it easy to be brave. A small ceiling gesture later. Dishes done. We climbed to the roof with leftover crumbs for Sunny's breakfast. The coupe door swung open on brand new hinges. The name, the perch, and promise peeked beneath the eave. Mason slipped an arm around my waist, tugging me close as the pigeon fluttered onto her. Perch ready? He asked, producing a tiny brass key on a string. He'd fashioned it from an old padlock, polished, looped with twine. 4. He draped it around my neck. First key to our first build, he said, cheeks coloring. Figured we can start. A ring, keys to things we make together. Emotion swelled so full it pinched my throat. I closed my hand over the key's cool metal and kissed him, slow and certain, while morning light ignited the city beyond our roof. Below, traffic horns began their daily chorus. Above, Sunny cooed approval. Between those notes, Mason's soft laugh rumbled against my chest. An anchor, a compass, a beginning. Whatever came next, family questions, sideways stares, the unpredictable winds of change, we would meet them. Here, side by side, keys jangling, feathers rustling, hearts newly unafraid. A month slipped by in feather-soft increments, morning feedings, late-night blueprint debates, twin coffee rings blooming on every scrap of paper we touched. The coop thrummed with life now, Sunny preening on her cedar perch, to hatchlings, blinking up at the wide world we'd built. Each day I woke before my alarm, half expecting the glow of discovery to fade. It never did. Late Saturday afternoon, I stood on the roof adjusting the last perch rail, the city's summer heat wavering above tarred shingles. Mason's footsteps sounded on the ladder. He surfaced grinning, battered backpack slung over one shoulder. Supply run complete, he announced, shaking a crinkling paper bag. Sunflower seeds for royalty, he thumbed at Sunny, and trail mix for commoners like us. Did you get the kind without raisins? I asked. He pressed a scandalized hand to his chest. I know your raisin trauma. I laughed, wiping sweat with my forearm. His easy consideration still startled me, like finding a favorite song queued up before I asked for it. He set the bag down, then slipped behind me, arms encircling my waist. The hug was light, yet everything in me settled as if he'd clicked. A frame into place, ready to grant Sunny her maiden flight. He murmured against my shoulder, ready if you are. We opened the coupe door. The pigeon hesitated, head bobbing, then hopped onto Mason's forearm. He extended his arm toward the sky. I steadied his elbow, both of us holding a breath. With a flick of wings, Sunny lifted, circled once overhead, an orbit drawn in living white chalk, then glided across rooftops toward the hazy river. "She'll come back," Mason whispered, fingers still outstretched. "She knows where home is," I said, feeling the truth of it pulse beneath my words. We stood like that for a while, side by side, hands brushing occasionally as though guided by an invisible magnet. The city simmered below, vendors closing stalls, kids chasing a soccer ball that thudded like a heartbeat against concrete. Evening. Gold slid across brick facades. A small promise in brass. Mason cleared his throat and dug into his pocket. I made something. He produced a slender brass key on a leather cord, edges filed smooth. I recognized my apartment number etched along the bow, his careful hand steady even in the tiny curves. The sight turned my lungs to warm clay. "I was going to give it to you tonight," he said, cheeks blooming pink beneath sunburn. "But this seemed right." His grin wobbled. "You don't have to wear it. I just thought you might want it any time." Words tangled behind my teeth. I answered by slipping the cord over my head, letting the key rest beside the coupe key he'd given me weeks ago. Two keys, both to spaces we'd built together, one of wood and wire, one of walls and whispered confessions. The weight felt perfect, like ballast for a journey just starting. Mason let out a shaky breath, relief bright in his eyes. I linked our fingers, lifted them, and kissed the backs of his knuckles. "My door's been open since that meteor shower," I said, voice hushed. "This just makes it official." Talking the road ahead, we settled on the blanket, knees touching. Sunny reappeared in the dusky sky, looping lazy circles before landing atop the coupe with a triumphant coo. Mason beamed. "Told you. Homing instinct. Think we've developed one of our own?" I teased. "Pretty sure." He sobered slightly. "My brother's dropping by tomorrow. I'm telling him about us." A flick of anxiety fluttered. "Gone just as fast. Do you want backup? You'll be at work, but knowing we're solid." "Is backup enough?" He paused, thoughtful. "I expect questions. Maybe jokes." A lopsided smile. "I'll survive." I squeezed his hand. "And I'll be home by 6 with celebratory takeout. Deal." He traced idle patterns over my wrist. "After that, maybe we plan that road trip. I found a sanctuary in the foothills, hawks, owls, the works." "Let me check deadlines," I said, already picturing sketchbooks packed beside binoculars. "But yes, absolutely yes." A gesture worth 1,000 contracts. Crickets started their nighttime overture. Streetlights winked on, one by one, until amber halos crowned every lamppost. Mason rose, tugging me with him to the parapet wall. Without a word, he lifted my hand to the smooth brick ledge. Side by side, we pressed our palms flat, fingers splayed. "First blueprint," he said softly. I followed his gaze. The city grid below, rooftop maze gleaming under sodium gold. I can live with that scale. We kept our hands there, mapping heartbeats into mortar lines. A warm breeze stirred his curls against my temple. He leaned in, lips brushing mine soft, sure, still carrying a hint of sunflower salt. The kiss deepened, unhurried, until skyline and traffic dissolved into the quiet thrum of two people choosing the same compass point. When we parted, he rested his forehead on mine. "This is just the prologue, right?" "Prologue," I confirmed. "Chapter 1. Sandwiches for dinner and a trip to hardware for more coupe varnish." He laughed. "Sunlight and twilight." "Chapter 2. Teaching hatchlings to navigate." "Chapter 3. Navigating everything else, together." He finished. We laced pinkies, our newest inside joke of a handshake, hand turned toward the hatch, behind us. Sunny fluffed her feathers, settling in for nightfall. Ahead, the stairwell glowed warm like a runway, step lights blinking us forward. I glanced back once more at the finished coupe, the city beyond, the sky still streaked with lavender. Home felt larger now, measured not in square footage, but in the distance a heart can travel. When another beats beside it, hand in hand, we started down. Keys clinked at my chest, a tiny duet promising doors never locked, paths never walked alone. And as we descended into the welcoming light, I realized the rooftop wasn't an ending at all. It was merely our favorite starting point.